Spider-Man: Edge of Time is quite a lot to take in as a story. I think the voice actors did a great job performing as their respective Spider-Men. The art style for the cutscenes looks amazing, the animations are done very nicely, and I really enjoyed the banter between Peter Parker and Miguel O'Hara. I do, however, wish this was much stronger as a story, because the writing stands out as the weaker link of this game. The time travel mechanics are very confusing and inconsistent. Peter Parker and Miguel O'Hara come across as out of character in many scenes. The plot is overall reliant on many inconsistencies, which can make the cause and effect very difficult to follow. While this game has lots of great ideas to offer in its story, I feel it would have largely benefited from additional redrafting. To explain why, I'm going to structure this video into a few sections. First, I'll cover the plot as a whole, then Peter Parker and Miguel O'Hara as characters, and then the characterization for CEO Peter Parker. I understand that there are people out there who don't care as much about the plot details and are more interested in discussing the character writing. And for those people, there are timestamps in the description if you want to skip over the discussion of the plot. Or if you just want to listen in for personal entertainment, that's also an option. One last thing, shout out to League Entertainment for helping out with a lot of these points, and a thank you to Colin for providing the Miguel O'Hara emotes that you'll see in the video. Their stuff is in the description if you want to check it out. Anyway, let's continue on with the video. Before I start talking about the plot, I feel it's important to establish a few factors. Firstly, CEO Peter Parker knows everything that past Peter Parker is told, evident by this dialogue.
Why reverse it, Miguel, when we can use it?
You know who I...
Of course. He knows, so I know.
Secondly, this game is apparently connected to Shattered Dimensions. I haven't seen any explicit statements from the developers, but I've seen people provide in-game references to Shattered Dimensions, even name-dropping the story arc as it's being referenced, so I suppose it's fair to say that there is a connection. And lastly, Miguel's plan from the beginning has been to reverse the effects of Sloane's actions. Sloane went to the 1970s to open up Alchemax earlier in history, which is why it exists in Peter Parker's time. Alchemax isn't supposed to exist in Peter Parker's time, and the basis of Miguel's plan is to overwrite these mistakes out of existence.
It's changed. Everything's changed. But it didn't start here. It started back then. Back around Peter Parker's time. And he can't fix it. Because he's gonna be dead.
But I work for Alchemax. You're saying that's somehow wrong?
Completely. At this point in time, you earn a living taking news pictures for J. Jonah Jameson.
The late-night ranting TV news guy? Forget it.
You can't forget it.
You need to lock it down on your end. And if you do, actually, I don't know. What happens if you do?
Then the backlash should collapse the quantum bridge and overwrite all of this, wiping it from existence.
It's all back to normal.
Same here.
I know this might be a bizarre thing to try to specify early on, but this will connect to many of the points I make later on in the video. Earlier, in the future, Miguel narrates to himself about Walker Sloane's plan to mess with time travel. Being an Alchemax employee himself, Miguel is well aware of its inner workings. Miguel for sure knows he's up to no good.
He's been siphoning Alchemax resources into converting the gateway in the old virtual unreality lab into something else. Something dangerous.
If Sloane is illegally siphoning Alchemax's resources for his gateway on the 66th floor, wouldn't Miguel just be able to notify the CEO and the law enforcement about this? And considering he works in the building, gathering evidence of this to get Sloane in prison shouldn't be much of a struggle. Even then, the building must have cameras in it, right? I'd assume by 2099 we'd have pretty good audio-visual cameras for security.
I'm almost embarrassed it took me so long to come up with it. I simply go back in time and launch Alchemax years before it was originally founded. Not only can I remake Alchemax in my image,
but you can dismantle Stark Fujikama before it gets started. You're a genius, sir.
So Walker Sloane doesn't even run Alchemax. He's one worker among many, and he's sharing his plans to use time travel to take over Alchemax, where anyone can hear this, or 2099 security cameras could pick up on this. And this is after hours, and Miguel explicitly states that heavier security measures kick in at night.
During the day, as Miguel O'Hara, Alchemax geneticist, I could have walked right in. But at night, the security protocols kick in.
What happens if Sloane's plan is heard by a security guard, or another worker in the building? What's Sloane's plan if security catches up to him, apprehends him, and shuts down his project? I understand that the exposition needs to be there somewhere, but Sloane would have the common sense to keep his private information private. Especially from the people he's trying to overpower.
of course the CEO will want me to have that degree of power. He's all about power, but he won't have anything to say about it by the time I'm done.
So the CEO is against Sloane's plan to go back in time and is all about power, but somehow Sloane can just casually chat about his plan in the CEO's building and create a time gateway on the 66th floor, all under the CEO's nose without him noticing? Was there no approvals or checks done for any of Sloane's projects? Sloane's proposal was to harness energy from the fourth dimension, which is manipulating time. The CEO would want constant tabs on a project like this, and cameras would be capturing what goes on in this room. The character bio for Sloane even outlines that the CEO wants control of such a project. The CEO would have seen the gateway before it was finished. It really shouldn't be possible for Sloane to use the CEO's building to build a time machine that the CEO doesn't even want in someone else's possessions. The mere butterfly effect alone can ruin some of his plans, so the CEO would want constant watch on something like this. Because of the CEO's absence, Sloane manages to enter the portal through the gateway. Miguel tries to chase him, but is stopped by these random tentacles in the portal where Miguel has shown Peter Parker's death. But Sloane was headed towards the 1970s, which is not Peter Parker's time, and Sloane wasn't even after Peter Parker. He was just trying to start Alchemex early on. Outside of advancing the plot, is there really a reason for Miguel to see this vision in-universe? This doesn't happen every other time people enter the portal. In fact, those tentacle restraints don't show up either. Miguel and Peter can frequently and casually travel through the gateway without being stopped by those tentacles in the portal. Yet, Miguel is stopped this one time by these random time tentacles to allow the plot to happen. I do want to add that Miguel's world completely transforms and changes the second that Sloane crosses into the portal. By this point, quantum causality would be in effect. If Sloane started Alchemex earlier on in history, then he's the one who runs Alchemex. If he's the one running Alchemex, then he doesn't have to propose his plan to the CEO to harness energy from the fourth dimension. He can just do it on his own accord since he runs the place, without telling any future employees about it. In Miguel's time, Miguel would have been present to see Sloane's proposal be accepted. But if Sloane already established Alchemex and keeps his project under the table, a time travel project that was finished before Miguel was even born, then Miguel would never know, meaning Miguel wouldn't be at Alchemex preventing Sloane's time travel gateway from being used. Miguel should not be here in the story, making it an impossibility that he can act against Sloane's plan. He shouldn't even be there to see what was done to Peter Parker's time.
I would love to, but I'm working with Dr. Octavius in the genetics lab on a DNA project. I had to download a sample of my own DNA into the permanent Alchemax genetic files. I'm still waiting for some test results.
Does it make sense for a character who wants to maintain a secret identity to submit a DNA sample into permanent company files? Doesn't seem like it, since his powers are tied to his DNA.
Kind of defeats the whole anonymous superhero thing.
This DNA sample is what allows Miguel to create a chrono link between himself and Peter Parker, which leads to their communication throughout the story.
That lunatic actually did it, and I saw it all.
Intruder in Time Research Lab. Maximum force can be used.
Wouldn't these security measures be present from the very moment Miguel enters the lab? We saw none of these security measures when he entered, and Miguel had some time to chill before any action was taken. 2099 technology shouldn't have this much of a delayed response to an intruder, and Sloane had 100 years to plan this, and used that advantage to prepare for the original Spider-Man.
Good try, Spider-Man, but I've had 100 years to plan this. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. I kept you close to keep an eye on you, make use of you. But now you're done.
I do want to give a brief reminder. Everything that Miguel is saying to Peter, the CEO Peter Parker should know of.
Peter Parker.
Who's that? Who's talking?
Miguel O'Hara, the Spider-Man from 2099.
So CEO Peter Parker just needs to keep tabs on Miguel O'Hara and prevent him from becoming Spider-Man. If Peter in the past knew this, then he would be able to get the drop on Miguel O'Hara. And beforehand, Miguel had to eventually get around to applying at Alchemex. The moment the CEO sees that job application, he'll know who to target to prevent Spider-Man 2099 from stopping his plans. Even prior to that, the character bio for Miguel literally confirms that he went to Alchemex's school for gifted youngsters. So even as a child, CEO Peter could have killed off Miguel before he even became Spider-Man, or removed him from the program to change his destiny, or keep close tabs on him to make sure he never becomes Spider-Man. CEO Peter being warned of Spider-Man 2099's identity and his intentions to prevent time travel should make it impossible for Miguel to actually prevent his plans from being executed, but he does nothing with this information.
A lunatic named Walker Sloan from 2099 created a time gateway. It was a one-way trip that dumped him sometime in the 1970s.
Miguel didn't see this. All he saw was the death of Spider-Man and that Peter Parker's time was changed. How could he have known that Sloan specifically went to the 1970s?
He then used his advanced knowledge to build Alchemax, years before it was supposed to be established, transforming your world and mine.
But the entire world has changed. From Miguel's point of view, Peter's career at the Daily Bugle shouldn't exist. Quantum causality would result in all records of Peter Parker being an Alchemax employee. It doesn't matter if Miguel saw this through the portal, that in itself is a problem. If the effects have taken place, if everything has changed, then he shouldn't be able to see Peter Parker working at the Daily Bugle. He would see him working at Alchemax if it were showing him the past events. In fact, prior to seeing the Daily Bugle, Miguel has shown Peter Parker dies on the 66th floor at Alchemax. If Miguel is seeing Peter die at Alchemax, then the changes have already taken place. There's absolutely no reason for Miguel to see Peter working at the Daily Bugle right after seeing him die at Alchemax and conclude that this is how reality is supposed to be.
Where does this so-called death happen?
Sloan's building another gateway on the 66th floor, so he can finally travel back and forth.
If Sloan is building another gateway on Peter Parker's 66th floor, then all Miguel has to do is go to his 66th floor, which would have the original gateway that he built to make his one-way trip to the 1970s. The problem is, the beginning of the game shows Miguel following Sloan to the gateway room.
Access to Time Research Lab granted, Mr. Sloan. Gateway room access granted, Mr. Sloan.
Yep, he's heading for his Time Research Lab, all right.
Miguel leaves the original gateway on the 66th floor to go to an elevator, have a Discord call with Peter Parker about what's going to happen on Peter's 66th floor, only for Miguel to race back to the 66th floor of 2099 to save Peter. Miguel left the gateway room at the 66th floor so the player can have a mission of reaching the 66th floor to save Peter. The stakes of this entire plot point is about Miguel being able to reach the 66th floor in time to save Peter, yet Miguel has been right by the gateway in question at the beginning, and only has to worry about reaching the gateway after he already left it. Despite being told that Peter is going to die at the gateway, Peter persists to stop Anti-Venom, who was sent over by Walker Sloan. During the sequence, we're given an introductory explanation of the concept of quantum causality.
The elevator I'm in just changed into a closet.
Rock just tried to kill me with an elevator. Weird coincidence.
Maybe not.
Wait, what? Something I did here had an effect on you in 2099? It's impossible.
Well, theoretically, it's not. The idea is called quantum causality. The two gateways created a link between our times.
Like a wormhole through the fourth dimension.
Right. Normally changing the past just creates an alternate timeline. But thanks to the wormhole, what you do there affects my time, and vice versa.
There are a lot of examples where this becomes a problem in the story. While I understand that it's meant to justify changes made to 2099, some of these changes just don't make sense. Like this, for example.
So, I'm in danger of frying from radiation because of explosions on your end?
Why would there be radiation leaks in 2099? Because of an explosion in 2011. Yes, the radiation leaks would start in 2011, but the leaks wouldn't continue for decades until 2099. If there were radiation leaks in Alchemax, the go-to response would be to shut down the building until those leaks are cleaned up, so that the building is safe to work in again. There's no way Alchemax would just let this radiation leak in their building for multiple decades. Even if it did leak for this long, Miguel wouldn't consciously enter an area that has such a radiation leak, even if there somehow weren't any warnings present, which there would be if the leak was still going on. Miguel just wouldn't enter that area, because he would see the danger present. Quantum causality can result in different choices being made, evident by the destruction of an elevator, resulting in putting a closet there instead, or destroying a big robot design, resulting in smaller robots being invested in instead. Quantum causality has to take into account how the world would react, not just the placement, removal, or destruction of objects, and it makes even less sense for Miguel to remember how these things were before. Miguel remarks on an elevator changing into a closet. That can't make sense, because by that logic, Peter should remark on the Daily Bugle changing into Alchemax. Peter doesn't, because it simply stands to reason that changes in the past will result in changes in the future, including what you remember. Miguel can't remember an elevator in that location if it was a closet this whole time. Miguel can't remember a giant robot there if it was actually smaller robots this whole time. The big robot never existed from Miguel's point of view, so there's no reason for him to remember it. Just like how the Daily Bugle was never Peter's workplace from his perspective, so there's no reason for him to remember it.
Seconds ago, the computer said she was crushed by some kind of falling debris. Now it says she dies in... No, wait, it's changing again.
It's the quantum causality, Peter. There's so much happening that it's going haywire.
This type of issue is present throughout this story. The data shouldn't be changing from Peter's perspective. His memory should just adjust accordingly like it did at the start of the game. You can't just remember records that were erased out of existence. The time travel mechanics are largely inconsistent in the story, and it just becomes difficult to follow, and this affects the entirety of the story since it all depends on the usage of quantum causality.
Intruder detected. Employ lethal force.
Oh, great. A Centurion.
I understand that these robots need to secure the building, but why would Alchemex have them fire rockets on the basis of there being an intruder? That would result in needless destruction to the building as opposed to firing bullets or lasers at the intruder.
Eddie, you're responsible for the explosions?
Trying to blow you up.
Why is Sloan okay with this plan? His building needs to be intact in order for his gateway to be intact. His plan was to send anti-venom to cause so much destruction in this building, which risks the destruction of his gateway, leaving him no way home. Why wouldn't Sloan have requested for this fight to take place outside of the building? His mind control isn't even infallible, it can be broken and is difficult to sustain, which is a problem for Sloan since anti-venom was allowed to know where his base of operations is. This plan just needlessly risks his own demise. A villain that's meant to be smart would take measures to bring these fights elsewhere to prevent their work from being compromised. For example,
Take this conflict elsewhere.
How dangerous is this guy? He drains my powers on contact, and he's invisible to my spider sense. And yeah, maybe I could avoid him. Plus, if his explosions bring the building down, people for blocks around will be killed.
so why didn't Peter bring the fight with anti-venom further away from Alchemex? Alchemex has plenty of explosive material. This is one of the least safest places to fight anti-venom. If he drew him outside of the building, that risk is largely reduced, and he doesn't have to worry about the building collapsing onto people from blocks away. When Spider-Man is smart, he typically plays keep away to bring the villain somewhere else that reduces the risk of casualties, as well as to prevent him from being so easily destroyed in a fight. In this case, Peter should be keeping his distance from anti-venom while delaying him, so that Miguel can arrive and ensure that anti-venom doesn't kill him. Not only that, but Peter should be initiating an evacuation to clear out this building. Even a simple fire alarm pull would have done the job, but at no point does he attempt to get people clear of the building.
So you're the head lunatic. Well, we haven't been properly introduced. I'm the guy who's gonna stop your plans.
Then web him right there. Sloan is unarmed, he is in control of anti-venom, and Peter is just standing there and letting Sloan yap and continue to control anti-venom. Even while anti-venom is visibly struggling and resisting, and isn't protecting Sloan right now, Peter is just watching while this is happening, instead of taking his golden opportunity to stop Sloan. This allows Sloan to announce his plan to enhance anti-venom, then press a button to do exactly that. Spider-Man didn't even try to stop him, and then Peter just sticks around fighting anti-venom head-on, knowing that this guy is supposed to kill him and that he drains his power on contact. Why does Spider-Man bother fighting anti-venom as opposed to playing keep away for the time being? And by keep away, I don't mean leave him unattended, I mean consistently dodge him in the vicinity, rather than just jumping at him guns blazing. For example,
So all I have to do is play keep away until his tank's on empty.
if he does this, he delays anti-venom long enough for Miguel to show up and take on anti-venom as well. And while Miguel deals with anti-venom, Peter can deal with Sloan in order to break the mind control. Spider-Man is supposed to be one of the more strategic superheroes. You'd expect him to outsmart his enemies rather than walking into fights without a plan. Even after Peter believes anti-venom is probably down for the count, he decides to walk up to him in the event that he's still in condition to fight, Despite knowing that he's invisible to his spider sense and drains his powers on contact, if Anti-Venom is at least temporarily down for the count, then why not go after Sloane while he's unprotected and force him to free Eddie Brock? It's such an easy way out of the issue for Peter, and there's no reason for him to ignore it. He even hears him growling in the background. He should know this is probably a bad idea.
Okay, guess I can go back now and take out Sloane once and for all.
Peter just heard Anti-Venom growling. How does he think Anti-Venom is for sure down for the count? And even if he wasn't, and was just temporarily down, there's no reason for Peter to not go to Sloane immediately and put a stop to his mind control. Because of this, he gets his powers drained and gets surprised when this has consequences. And even after Anti-Venom comes back and drains his powers, he still fights him head on instead of playing keep away until Miguel gets here. These fall into smaller character problems I have, but on top of Peter's poor strategy, I don't like how he doesn't take the situation seriously when the fabric of reality is at stake, and at times he just doesn't take Miguel's life being in danger seriously. There are times where instead of immediately trying to find a solution to Miguel's life literally being in danger, he uses comedy to deflect instead of actively trying to work a solution with him.
Parker, I'm in a jam and you put me there.
Hey, I was having a quiet evening until you started talking inside my head. Don't blame me for this. All right, fine. What do you need me to do? O'Hara? Great, he's gone.
Yeah, I wonder why he might not be able to respond.
I'm in a jam and you put me there.
This one is even worse, because Miguel is straight up dying of radiation poisoning, and Peter just mocks him and doesn't take him seriously.
So, I'm in danger of frying from radiation because of explosions on your end?
Hey, you're the one who told me about quantum causality.
Yeah, well, now I'm telling you to fix this.
Sheesh, what a grouch.
When a man is dying, it's probably not the best time to give him flack or attitude.
Save my baby, please!
Sheesh, what a grouch.
Spider-Man! We can't move! We're pinned down!
Sheesh, what a grouch.
Spider-Man, I need your help!
Sheesh, what a grouch.
Good try, Spider-Man, but I've had 100 years to plan this. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. I kept you close to keep an eye on you, make use of you. But now you're done.
This implies that Sloane knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man and employed him at Alchemax for this reason. So now his plan makes even less sense, because all he had to do to draw Spider-Man away from his building was to send Anti-Venom after MJ, for example, and let Peter know this was happening. That makes his plan even safer to commit to. And furthermore, his plan to unleash Anti-Venom at Alchemax just risks the attention of S.H.I.E.L.D., the Avengers, the X-Men, whoever else is out there that would have interest in what's happening at Alchemax. What's his plan if Iron Man pulls up to help Spider-Man, goes to the 66th floor with Spider-Man, and discovers the gateway? What happens if Iron Man smashes it to pieces because this can literally destroy the fabric of reality? Why would Sloane allow this to possibly leak to a bunch of heroes who can stop him? All he had to do was send Anti-Venom to Coney Island or something, which wouldn't trace back to Alchemax. Even then, let's say Spider-Man actually does die at Alchemax. No matter what, the police will show up to the building because of the destruction, and possibly come across Spider-Man's body, Anti-Venom himself, or any other employee that was hurt or killed because of the destruction. Either way, Alchemax is now open to an investigation, and if the cops find his gateway that literally has a working wormhole that time travels, then Sloane is screwed, and he loses control over the time stream. Why put Alchemax on the radar? All of his work may even be undone, because if he isn't able to sustain the existence of the gateway in the past, because Alchemax as a company gets shut down, then how could he have gotten here in the first place? He'll be born decades later, and never make it to Alchemax because it wouldn't exist as a company anymore, and therefore he can't use Alchemax's resources to build a gateway in Alchemax. I understand that risks are inherently part of a villain's plans, but the smarter ones take calculated risks. Obviously, Sloane is willing to risk the fabric of time to bring himself on top of Alchemax, but that's necessary for him to get what he wants. This plan with Anti-Venom isn't, because it has obvious alternatives that are in his favor. Another thing about Sloane is that he has no Alchemax robots surrounding him in the event that Anti-Venom retaliates, or just any other heroes that try to intervene with what he does. He has such poor protection for himself, and is incompetent at maintaining basic secrecy. If any robot of his just shot at Spider-Man while he was crawling, it's literally game over. I don't understand how Spider-Man punching Anti-Venom in the face results in him knocking out Anti-Venom so easily. when he's literally more durable than Spider-Man and is capable of regeneration, and Spider-Man's powers are literally being drained by anti-venom, and this one punch somehow knocks him out? Even a base Spider-Man punching Venom in the face shouldn't result in this. And this isn't like the fridge in Spider-Man 2 that changes literally nothing about the plot. This actively allows Peter to be freed by Miguel.
There's some kind of monsters breaking in. Where'd they come from?
Just keep calm. They're probably mutation experiments from other regeneration eggs in that lab.
Why would Miguel put Peter in that lab then? And if he was going to choose this lab, then why not ensure it was safe for Peter to be here? I don't care if quantum causality spawned those regeneration eggs in those chambers after Miguel left him, because quantum causality would also result in Miguel accounting for those regeneration eggs if they were present the whole time. Either way, this doesn't work.
Show you just how grateful I am!
No! Keep back! One side, you fool!
Why does Miguel watch and let this happen? If Doc and Sloan die, then he loses two major sources of information regarding the Gateway. This could also have ramifications to the timeline, because Sloan's demise would make it impossible for him to maintain Alchemax, and therefore his future self that gets born later won't be able to make a Gateway at Alchemax. On top of this, what Anti-Venom does here can easily damage the Gateway, which also risks ramifications to the timeline. Even if he doesn't damage the Gateway, Anti-Venom just going to 2099 when he's from the past could result in changes in the future. So that's an additional risk of ramifications to the timeline. And on top of this, Shattered Dimensions does imply that Miguel doesn't want to kill his enemies.
Oh no, I didn't mean to make him disappear.
You didn't. I have saved him from peril and transported him to safety, thanks to a dimensional rift caused by the tablet. But please, try not to be so cavalier next time.
Good to know you got my back.
But he basically allowed Anti-Venom to kill off Doc Ock and Walker Sloan. What if Doc Ock wasn't supposed to die at that point in time? What if this actively changes things in 2099 and causes time paradoxes? It's just largely irresponsible of Miguel to just watch and let that happen after he wins the fight. Later on, Peter learns of MJ's demise and insists that Miguel should save her. He goes on his way to do so, and he looks for her.
Mary Jane, head toward the sound of my voice. Mary Jane!
What? Oh, thank God. Wait! Who are you? I don't care, just help me!
Mary Jane! Oh, shock.
So MJ runs away from the guy who was trying to help her, who she just acknowledged is trying to help her, and Miguel was just standing there and expecting MJ to come to him, rather than already being in the motion of swinging to her.
Miguel, it's changing again.
What does it say?
Actually, nothing. What does that mean?
Honestly, that means she wasn't important enough to be remembered.
This line is direct acknowledgement that changes to the past will affect what people remember in the future, or how they behave in the future. So that means that when Peter goes through the archives, he wouldn't find MJ's death. Miguel and Peter can't be doing this mission. It's a downright impossibility. The only reason they're doing this mission in the first place is because of a record that said MJ dies at Alchemax. Things like this are why the quantum causality concept is just broken in execution.
With great power comes great responsibility and great opportunity. And the only way to live up to all that responsibility is to use every opportunity to get all the power. I learned that the day I lost everyone I loved and didn't have the power to stop it.
What do you mean, everyone?
You'll find out.
Wait a minute. MJ doesn't die at Alchemax. The records would show this, and CEO Peter Parker's memories would amend this. He didn't lose everyone he loved. The records show literally the opposite. MJ should still be with him since the anti-aging drug would have kept her in the year 2099. Does Peter even bring this up to his future counterpart when he makes the claim that he loses everyone he loves? Additionally, these frequent changes to the timeline should be indicative to CEO Peter Parker that events in the past are changing beyond his control, and he can't reliably predict how things will turn out when you have two Spider-Men responsible for these changes. Why does he tell his younger self his plan? Why does he blindside himself with what he'll become? Obviously, younger Peter is going to reject this. He probably wouldn't even believe it. One of his assumptions might be that this is just Chameleon or Mysterio from the future trying to mess with him. Peter wouldn't believe that this is his destiny, and even if he does buy that this is a future version of himself, he would still fight against that destiny. This is something that happens in the game, and is exactly why CEO Peter Parker gets defeated, and that's not something you need to allow to play out to realize it would happen. Had he kept quiet and simply went on to manipulate time, there'd be nothing Peter and Miguel could do to stop him. Another thing I'd like to mention, but if Miguel was literally in school to eventually work under Alchemax, and ended up doing so, then how does he not know who the CEO of Alchemax is? He works for the company, but never knew basic information like the CEO? The character bio states that he was recruited by Alchemax and that he worked through the ranks from there. There would be company records on Peter Parker, and quantum causality would force Miguel to remember Peter Parker as a prominent figure in Alchemax. And to refresh on something mentioned earlier, Miguel was prevented from entering the gateway by these time tentacles. Somehow, this hasn't stopped either of the Spider-Men from entering the gateway.
What the? Friends of yours? Yeah. I'm just full of surprises. He doesn't know about Atrocity. I can use them, especially the anti-venom part.
How does the CEO not know about Atrocity? He knows Miguel's identity because of what Peter Parker knows.
Why reverse it, Miguel, when we can use it?
You know who I...
Of course. He knows, so I know.
By the end, Miguel and Peter Parker overwrite Alchemax out of Peter's time, and the bad guys are defeated. I don't know why Peter is able to remark on the changes when none of this actually happened from his perspective. He shouldn't know what Alchemax is. His suit shouldn't be shredded if this event was overridden. And let's recall this line.
Normally changing the past just creates an alternate timeline. But thanks to the wormhole, what you do there affects my time, and vice versa.
The wormhole literally got shut down in the story. If the wormhole is shut down, then the timelines are no longer linked. Peter's time, 2011, should be branching off into an alternate timeline. 2099 should be in its own separate timeline. Miguel and Peter should lose their connection. If Peter and Miguel are on diverging timelines, then the DNA strand that Miguel has shouldn't be connected to Peter anymore. It'd be a DNA strand that exists in Miguel's timeline. If Peter's timeline is diverging, then his DNA sample will never reach the Miguel we know in game. Their Discord call is over. Not even that, but Miguel only had that DNA sample because Peter submitted it to Alchemax. Peter doesn't work at Alchemax anymore. He works at the Daily Bugle because Alchemax doesn't exist anymore. He couldn't have indirectly given the DNA strand to Miguel, so how are they still talking?
If the timeline snapped back to normal, if none of it happened, how do you and I remember? I mean, we've got two different sets of memories in our brains. Shouldn't that be making us, I don't know, crazy?
You really want a 5-hour lecture on temporal paradoxes?
Not really, but it'd be nice to have some kind of logical explanation. There's no logical explanation for how characters in the story, Peter included, don't realize that the past has been changed, but the entirety of the story is dependent on the fact that Peter and Miguel are somehow aware of these changes. If Alchemax never existed for Peter Parker, he can't remember his battle at Alchemax since by the end of the game, Alchemax never existed for Peter. If Peter's employment at the Daily Bugle is overridden out of existence, then Miguel couldn't have any way of remembering this, because it didn't happen from his perspective. You can't have Peter fully ignorant to the fact that the Daily Bugle just turned into Alchemax, but also have him fully aware of Alchemax shifting back into the Daily Bugle. You can't have your cake and eat it too.
Unless you bake 2 cakes.
Coincidentally, Reed Richards did the first studies, which hypothesized that time is like a vortex. And when major changes occur in the surrounding vortex, anyone who is dead center of the disruption can observe them without being affected, like being in the eye of a storm. He called it the observer effect.
This is all I can find in terms of trying to explain the time travel effects. I see what it's aiming for, but I don't think this tells me enough. When I think of time, I think of a stream of events that are linked to each other, so if you want me to think of it like a vortex for this game, I need to know how that correlates. This game still acknowledges that changes to the past affect the future. That's the whole basis of quantum causality. I assume being dead center of the disruption means you're directly involved in causing it, or at least close enough to witness or be associated with it? I'm not sure, but assuming it requires some kind of connection to the timeline changes, Miguel wasn't dead center of the disruption when Anti-Venom caused explosions and caused radiation leaks. Peter and Anti-Venom were. Miguel can't be unaffected by this. He still wouldn't consciously go to the radiation leak. And all of Alchemax's staff weren't dead center to these explosions, so they wouldn't be unaffected either. They'd still notice the radiation leak and fix it. I don't think there's a consistent basis for how the time travel works, especially quantum causality. I've talked plenty about how the time travel isn't explained very clearly, so I'm just gonna move on. Where was Madam Web this entire time? If this is remotely connected to Shattered Dimensions, then she would notice what's happening to the timeline and intervene to fix it. That's all I have to say for the plot. I think it's overall non-functional and needed a couple more drafts to tighten up the details. For discussion of the characters, I'm gonna start with Peter Parker. I do not like Peter Parker in this game. That's not to say he doesn't have any redeeming elements. Allow me to highlight some of these.
It doesn't matter. Get out of the building.
So a crazed killer can wander around the building without me to stop him? No way. You've got a lot to learn about priorities, pal. I'm gonna do what I think is right, and that means going after bad guys. You want a Spider-Man who'll do whatever you want? Go play a video game.
Do you want to die?
Of course not. I want to run away even less.
I'm just trying to stay alive.
If you were, you'd clear out. But you have to prove your bravery.
Bravery? Dude, there is nothing I would like better than to just hightail it out of here.
Then why the shock don't you?
Because what I do here matters, okay? Beyond changing hallways into elevators, it matters. And that's just something I have to live with, even if it means I die with it. You get it, O'Hara?
He took off again.
Yeah, if only you'd do the same.
O'Hara, if you don't get that I can't turn my back on danger, no matter what the cost, then you've got no business calling yourself Spider-Man.
Peter Parker is very clearly depicted in a way we've gotten quite used to at this point. He doesn't turn his back in the face of danger to others, no matter what the cost. No matter how big the burden may carry, he can't allow someone to suffer or die because Spider-Man failed to act. And that's great. I love when Spider-Man abides by that in stories. But the problem I have with that is that at many points in the story, Peter Parker betrays those principles for seemingly no reason, to the point of being out of character. And even if Peter Parker is to betray those principles or act irrationally or irresponsibly, good Spider-Man stories will challenge him for this, instead of parading these flaws as heroic. Spider-Man 2 challenges Peter's decision to quit being Spider-Man. Into the Spider-Verse challenges Miles' decision to run away from his problems under pressure. Spider-Man PS4 challenges Peter's Parker pride and how that causes him to push away help when he needs it. And when they overcome these flaws and are shaped into a better hero, the story celebrates it and acknowledges that this is who Spider-Man should be. I've mentioned problems with Peter being unintelligent and careless earlier, but I think you can still have a functional character even with minor issues like that. However, I think there are crucial moments in the story that arguably destroy Peter Parker as a character. For example, this exchange right here, where Peter talks about staying in 2099 and abandoning his responsibilities to his own world.
You stay put.
I've been thinking maybe staying put isn't such a bad idea.
Meaning what?
Before we continue, I do want to add that Peter choosing to stay in 2099 is actively engaging in time manipulation. Because of Peter's choices to stay in 2099 and never come home, this risks actively changing history in ways that can disrupt the fabric of reality, like Sloane already has. The butterfly effect alone should be indicative of the risk of major ramifications to the timeline. This can destroy the fabric of reality. Peter knows this. That's the basis of their entire mission.
You're talking about the fabric of reality, not Breadful! Come on, O'Hara, it's not like anti-venom was a fluke. Someone's always trying to kill me, and there's always a chance of my loved ones being caught in the crossfire. If I stay here, no one I love will suffer or die because of me.
This line is antithetical to Spider-Man's existence. Spider-Man is suggesting that inaction is the solution to his problems and will keep his loved ones safe, but inaction is what got Uncle Ben killed in the first place. This is why Peter became Spider-Man. This is why he never turns his back in the face of danger. Inaction to many threats to the city and the world is not something Peter Parker would ever think is a solution, especially because it doesn't take into consideration the safety of anyone else but his loved ones. Spider-Man doesn't just fight for his loved ones, he fights for all of us. If Spider-Man fought for himself and his loved ones, that defeats the purpose of with great power comes great responsibility. And furthermore, another gigantic problem with this line is that Peter knows that tampering with time can disrupt the fabric of reality. If the fabric of reality is destroyed, then his loved ones will die too. Everyone will die. And it makes even less sense when you consider the cause of Peter's thoughts here. Anti-Venom didn't hurt any of Peter's loved ones. They were far away from the action. And even if he did hurt any of his loved ones, The solution isn't inaction. That's what got Uncle Ben killed and inspired Peter to become a hero. Peter's sole basis for this conclusion is that he fought a supervillain when he's been fighting formidable supervillains for years. And if Spider-Man wasn't there to fight Anti-Venom, then Sloan would just continue to play with the timeline and risk the fabric of reality, which threatens his loved ones. Any threat to the city and the world will threaten the lives of Peter's loved ones anyway, because they live there. Miguel even tries to bring up all the lives he'll end up saving by continuing to be Spider-Man in his world.
What about all the good you've done, and will do? The people you'll inspire, including me.
You're saying the lives of a billion strangers are more important than my loved ones?
Being Spider-Man is a sacrifice. That's the job.
This line has been talked about a lot as a betrayal to Spider-Man as a character, and I have to agree. This isn't something Spider-Man would ever say. Spider-Man would die to save the lives of a billion strangers. Spider-Man doesn't solely fight for his loved ones. The death of Uncle Ben taught Peter to use his powers to fight for everyone, a billion strangers included. The idea that Spider-Man would downplay the value of a billion strangers tells me how little regard he has for human life. This isn't Spider-Man.
I'm not saying that. History says that.
Yeah, well, history doesn't have to wrestle with guilt.
And what about the guilt of a billion strangers suffering or dying? Oh wait, he doesn't care. Spider-Man doesn't care.
Goodbye.
I can't access the archives on this end, but you can on yours. I'll guide you to the archive room, and you can give me the information I need.
The archives room? That would be handy. I could look up the people I love and keep them out of danger.
This line further cements the idea that Peter Parker is only fighting for himself. Take note of the wording. He specifies the people he loves when talking about keeping people from danger, but doesn't hold the same energy to the many people in history who would also have potentially preventable fates due to future knowledge. But I think the answer for why this isn't done is pretty clear.
Don't you dare poke around in there, Parker. You've already seen the dangers of screwing with the past. Learn from the mistakes instead of repeating them.
That's right. We have direct acknowledgement that making these changes to the past can result in the destruction of reality. Miguel is only changing the past to reverse the damage Walker Sloan has done and will do, so that all of reality is safe. Peter has different ideas.
It's Mary Jane. She dies. Tonight! Right there at Alchemax!
Alchemax is not going to exist by the time Miguel has finished his plan, because his plan is to undo what Walker Sloan has done.
Then the backlash should collapse the quantum bridge and overwrite all of this, wiping it from existence!
If Alchemax doesn't exist in Peter Parker's time, then MJ isn't going to die because of the destruction done by Sloan at Alchemax. Alchemax will not exist. She can't die from an event that's being overridden anyway.
You can't just ignore that she's in danger.
Hey, I'm trying to focus on what's important.
What's important is not standing by and allowing someone to suffer or die because you do nothing. If you don't get that, then you don't get the first thing about being Spider-Man.
Is Peter Parker saying this for the well-being of humanity as a whole, or his own selfish desires?
You're the one who doesn't get it, Parker. The future depends on...
My future is meaningless without her!
Well, that answers my question. Peter isn't fighting for everyone's future, because I guess they can just hang for all he cares.
You're saying the lives of a billion strangers are more important than my loved ones?
Look, in a vacuum, I do like this scene, but in context, this further cements the damage done to Peter Parker as a character. Peter is fighting for himself and his loved ones. It's strictly selfish. People have used this scene to argue that this version of Peter Parker is truly noble and understands what it means to be a hero, but this scene and the surrounding context shows the opposite. Peter isn't fighting for everyone, he's fighting for himself. It's blatantly selfish to the point he completely disregards the lives of everyone else. A billion strangers, as he puts it. He doesn't care, as long as the people he loves gets to survive. Peter will risk the fabric of reality just to save MJ from an event that Miguel is going to overwrite out of existence anyway, meaning that Peter was going to get the universe destroyed for literally nothing. This isn't in character, and this isn't heroic. Even while Miguel is trying to save MJ, they explicitly remark on the fact that the universe is unraveling and could end at any moment.
Temporal rifts are opening all over. It's like the fabric of space-time is being stretched thinner and thinner. It may reach a point where it's irreparable.
And when people have talked about this, I've seen the goalpost shift to claiming that characters acting selfishly or irrationally isn't a sign of bad character writing. I'm not going to explain why this is out of character once again, because I feel it's pretty self-evident why it is by this point, but characters acting selfishly or irrationally, especially those that are superheroes, should be recognized as such in the narrative. These selfish behaviors should be challenged and not celebrated as the right thing to do. I've spoken about framing earlier on, but I want to follow up on that here to show how this game frames Peter's decision here.
You're as brave and unselfish as another guy who goes by the handle Spider-Man. You're a worthy successor to the name.
The story celebrates this decision and frames Peter as brave and selfless, despite how evident it is that Peter is only fighting for himself. We don't have that moment where Peter is challenged and has to learn his lesson and becomes better for it. Peter doesn't grow in this game because he ultimately did what he did to save himself and his loved ones. I've seen people claim that this game understands Spider-Man more than Across the Spider-Verse, and that this Peter Parker would have rightfully stood up to Miguel's stance on the canon. If anything, if Miguel's canon dictated that 1 billion strangers will die, but Peter's loved ones get to stay alive, this version of Peter would have agreed with Miguel's canon. Miles Morales is different. Miles doesn't ask Miguel if the lives of 1 billion strangers are more important than his father. Miles says, I can do both. He doesn't pick and choose based on who he loves. Miles is fighting for everyone because he actually cares. In Edge of Time, Peter is only looking into the archives to save the people he loves. He doesn't care about using the archives to save the other people in history who would die. Contrast to Miles Morales, who doesn't just fixate on the people he loves, or his dad specifically. He brings up George Stacy, a guy he never met. He brings up Ben Parker, a guy he never met. Miles is fighting for the countless lives, the infinite amounts of strangers in the infinite multiverse that are going to be lost to Miguel's canon, because he is truly trying to save everyone. And it's not like we can argue that following Miguel's canon will save his father anyway. Meanwhile, following Miguel's plan in Edge of Time erases Alchemax from existence, so MJ does get saved anyway. You can't even argue that this is noble for Peter, because even if you run with that logic, that means Peter could look into more of the archives to save other people in history who have died, even from a simple elevator accident, but Peter never attempts to do that. I wonder why.
You've already seen the dangers of screwing with the past.
If you want to hear me talk more about Across the Spider-Verse, especially on this topic, check out my video on the movie, timestamps in the description. But moving forward, it's not just Peter Parker who is behaving out of character here. Miguel O'Hara is completely in character in this scene, up until he gives up his entire position, despite Peter doing nothing to actually disprove it.
This is gonna be a huge mistake.
Miguel knows how bad of an idea this is. He knows that this will probably destroy the universe, and as I've shown earlier, this almost does happen, and Miguel acknowledges it as he's saving MJ.
I owe you, Miguel. Big time.
Shocking right you do. But, well, maybe this'll help even the score for everything the world owes you.
The world doesn't owe Peter their lives just to save MJ. The world shouldn't have to owe Peter anything. Peter should just do what's better for them. Miguel doesn't even remind Peter that his plan will overwrite Alchemax out of existence, and that his plan all along was to fix the damage done by Sloan. If he brings up the fact MJ is meant to live anyway, this will shut Peter up and he has no argument. But Miguel doesn't bring this up, and just goes along with Peter's plan. This is a huge assassination of Miguel O'Hara, not only because Miguel believes the fabric of reality will be destroyed but does this anyway, but also because this makes Miguel a pushover who doesn't stand up for himself, which is just as out of character. Miguel is consistently pushing back against Peter, very strictly too, whenever he believes Peter is doing something wrong or mistaken. He would not just give up like this. Imagine if in Across the Spider-Verse, because Miles said he didn't like what Miguel had to say, Miguel just folded immediately and dropped his entire mission to maintain canon, in spite of believing the integrity of the multiverse depends on it. It would be equally out of character if he became a pushover and just gave up. Both of our Spider-Men have taken major hits as characters, and I can't say they're good characters because of this. Peter Parker blatantly doesn't care about the rest of the world and only fights for himself. And Miguel O'Hara doesn't stand up for what he believes is best for everyone, despite knowing the consequences. I know it sounds weird for me to specify, but Spider-Man cares about people, and stands up for his beliefs. He's not just fighting for himself, Spider-Man cares about the little guy. You could be a bunch of strangers, not even 1 billion of them, and Spider-Man will put everything on the line just to save you. Just to do the right thing, he will give up on his greatest desires, whether it be a prom date, a chance with his romantic interest, an undisturbed life of his own, the only family he has left, his own life. He will ultimately decide to make those sacrifices, even if he struggles on the way there. and he's not just going to give up on what he believes is right just because someone opposed what he said, whether it be telling him to use his power to lift himself up and step on everyone else, to look the other way for someone else's crimes for money, to not play it so safe and see if more lives can be saved, or to let some people die to ensure the safety of everyone else. Spider-Man will stand up for his beliefs, no matter which side he's on. Did you just lean in for a kiss? Do you love MJ or not? Would you let the world get destroyed for Black Cat 2? The main villain of this game is Peter Parker, in the future. And my main issues with this villain are actually quite easy to summarize. I think the main issue is simply that in order to understand Peter Parker's motivations and how he became the villain he is, we have to read a wall of text from his character bio. It essentially outlines that Peter Parker created an anti-aging drug to prolong his career as Spider-Man, which makes sense of how Peter Parker losing all of his loved ones would push him to such desperate measures. However, this unexpectedly started to alter Peter Parker's brain chemistry, slowly over the course of many years, due to the radioactivity in his bloodstream interacting with the drugs. That is a compelling reason for how Peter Parker, in spite of wanting to save everyone, ended up losing himself and turned to a path of villainy without realizing it.
With great power comes great responsibility and great opportunity. And the only way to live up to all that responsibility is to use every opportunity to get all the power. I learned that the day I lost everyone I loved and didn't have the power to stop it.
You're on the wrong side of this. I'm not the villain here. I'm the guy who's trying to make everything right. I can make up for my original sin by saving Uncle Ben. Not to mention Gwen Stacy, her dad, countless others. What kind of villain fixes it so that everyone gets to live happily ever after?
The thing is, you need to do a lot of legwork to bring Peter Parker of all characters down to this point. Nowhere do the cutscenes outline that Peter Parker's brain chemistry was being altered by the anti-aging drugs. And I do wish this was actually talked about in the cutscenes. I wish this was something specifically challenged to the CEO's face, either by Peter or Miguel. Crucial elements to explain a villain's motivations and their initial downfall shouldn't be outlined in walls of text. It'd be like if Spider-Man PS4 tried to explain how the neural interface affected Doc Ock through walls of text in the character bio section instead of clear-cut explanations shown in the cutscenes. It also makes for a less interesting villain overall. CEO Peter Parker can't work as a villain without the explanation of what those drugs actually did to him, because simply losing everyone shouldn't be enough for Peter Parker to be okay with possibly dooming all of reality. How the anti-aging drugs affected Peter Parker are at least worth acknowledging in the cutscenes themselves, since they're responsible for giving us the meat of the story, and it can result in compelling drama between the characters, perhaps showing us how current-day Peter Parker learns from the mistakes from his future counterpart, because they're still the same person at the end of the day, or the end of time, whatever. The end just kinda goes, woohoo, we stopped him and Peter will never become him, and that's how it ends. And I won't lie, it's a little hard to believe Peter Parker won't become evil after the things I've broken down earlier. I can definitely see where a lot of the ideas are coming from, and with some more redrafting, I think the execution could have worked. But I don't think this is a Spider-Man story that holds up overall. I think it could have been done so much better in many regards, and it didn't service Peter Parker and Miguel O'Hara's characters very well. The plot needed lots of work, especially with Sloane's planning and the time travel mechanics. I do see the potential this had to be a good story, and I just wish it stuck the landing. But enough of what I think. What do you guys think? Feel free to comment below. Also feel free to come on for Disagreement Day, generally hosted by myself, Colin, and League Entertainment. We do live streams about every week or two to take in disagreements people have with our takes. My Discord is in the description if you want to reach out to me in the interest of Disagreement Day, and I promise not to give a 5-hour lecture on quantum causality when we talk. That's all I have to say for now. This is where I say goodbye.